It was an ordinary day at the restaurant, the kind where the hum of conversation mixed with the clinking of silverware created a familiar rhythm. The place had a reputation: warm lighting, polished tables, and a menu that people swore was worth every penny. But for Lisa, a young waitress working the evening shift, it was just another night of running plates, jotting down orders, and juggling the occasional difficult customer. She was good at her job, quick with a smile, sharp with her memory. But like anyone, she had her moments. That evening, a man walked in. He wasn't flashy. No loud entrances or airs about him. He wore a simple jacket, jeans, and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. The kind of customer who could easily blend in. To Lisa, he was just another diner at table 7. She handed him a menu, gave the usual spiel about specials, and went on her way without a second glance. But then came the small requests. The man politely asked if the music could be turned down just a little. A while later, he asked if the kitchen could tweak his order. Nothing major, just a slight change to the preparation. Lisa, already stressed from a packed dining room and a few unruly customers, wasn't having it. She thought, why can't people just eat what's on the menu? When he asked for a refill on his coffee, her patience finally snapped. She leaned in, barely hiding her irritation, and said, maybe you should just eat somewhere else if you have so many preferences. We're busy, in case you haven't noticed. She didn't shout, but her tone was sharp enough to cut. The man looked up at her, startled, but said nothing. He gave her a polite nod, as though he'd heard the message loud and clear. The rest of the meal was uneventful, also Lisa thought. He finished his food, left a tip that was generous enough to make her feel a little guilty, and quietly walked out. She dismissed him as just another picky customer who'd pushed her buttons. It wasn't until later that night, when the staff was cleaning up and the manager called everyone to the kitchen, that Lisa realized something was off. The air in the room was tense. The manager, a no-nonsense woman named Carla, had a look on her face that Lisa couldn't quite read, somewhere between disbelief and amusement. "Who served the man at table 7 tonight?" Carla asked, holding up a check slip, as if it were evidence in a crime. Lisa froze. "I did," she said cautiously, raising her hand. "Why? Did he complain or something?" Carla let out a small laugh, the kind that wasn't meant to be funny. "Complain? Not exactly, but you might want to sit down for this." Lisa's heart started to race. What could be so important about some guy at table 7? It's not like he was anyone special. Or so she thought. Carla took a deep breath before continuing. "That man you snapped at, that was Clint Eastwood." The words hit Lisa like a freight train. Clint Eastwood. The actor, the director, the Hollywood legend. The name alone carried weight, but it was what Carla said next that made Lisa's stomach drop. "And just so you know," Carla added, her tone sharp, "he owns this restaurant." Lisa's mind spun. Clint Eastwood. The same man she'd brushed off, snapped at, and practically told to leave. She couldn't believe it. Why hadn't anyone warned her? Why didn't he say something? And more importantly, what was going to happen now? The entire staff fell silent, waiting to see how Lisa would react. Her face turned red as the weight of the situation hit her. She wasn't just worried about losing her job. She was worried about how she'd ever live this down. Clint Eastwood wasn't just a celebrity, he was an icon, and she had insulted him. What Lisa didn't know was that Clint Eastwood wasn't the type to make a scene. He didn't need to. But his silence left everyone guessing. Would there be consequences? Would he come back? And most importantly, what had he thought of her bold, albeit misguided, honesty? Lisa barely slept that night. Her mind raced as she replayed every second of her interaction with Clint Eastwood. How could she not have recognized him? She wasn't exactly a die-hard movie fan, but Clint Eastwood. He was a household name. She remembered seeing his face on billboards, hearing his name in conversations, and watching glimpses of his movies on TV growing up. And yet, in the dim lighting of the restaurant, wearing that unassuming cap, he had looked like any other customer. The next morning, Lisa arrived at work early, her nerves on edge. She wasn't sure what to expect. Would there be an official complaint waiting for her? Would Clint Eastwood himself walk in and fire her on the spot? The possibilities seemed endless, and none of them were good. Carla raised an eyebrow, clearly amused by Lisa's sudden curiosity. A while now. He loves this town and wanted a place where people could come together over good food. It's not about the money for him, it's about the community. Lisa nodded, feeling a pang of guilt. The man she'd snapped at wasn't just a Hollywood icon. He was someone who genuinely cared about the place she worked at, the people who ate there, and the staff who kept it running. Her frustration last night suddenly felt small and petty in comparison. But as much as Lisa tried to move past it, the tension lingered. Every moment felt like the calm before a storm. The more she thought about it, the more questions swirled in her mind. Had Clint taken her words to heart? Was he the kind of person who held grudges, or would he simply brush off the incident as a bad day for both of them? The answer came sooner than she expected. Late in the afternoon, just as the dinner rush was picking up, the door swung open, and there he was. Clint Eastwood, dressed just as casually as the night before, stepped inside. The hum of the restaurant seemed to dip as people turned their heads, some recognizing him immediately. Lisa froze in place, a tray of drinks balanced in her hands. He didn't look angry. If anything, he looked calm, too calm. He scanned the room, gave a small nod to Carla at the counter, and then headed straight for the same table as the night before, table 7. Lisa's heart pounded in her chest. She knew she couldn't avoid him, not this time. Carla caught her eye and gave her a small, encouraging nod as if to say, "You've got this." Summoning every ounce of courage she had, Lisa walked over to his table, her hands gripping her notepad tightly. "Good evening," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "Welcome back. Can I get you started with something to drink?" Clint looked up at her, his piercing eyes locking with hers. For a moment, the silence stretched, and Lisa thought she might faint. Then, to her surprise, he smiled, a small, genuine smile that made the tension in her shoulders ease just a little. "I'll take a coffee," he said, his tone easygoing. "Black, same as last night." Lisa nodded quickly. "Right away," she replied, spinning on her heel and heading straight for the coffee machine. Her hands shook as she poured the cup, careful not to spill a drop. She placed it on a tray, took a deep breath, and returned to his table. "Here you go," she said, setting the cup down in front of him. Before she could walk away, Clint spoke again. "Lisa, right?" Her eyes widened. "Ah, yes," she stammered. He leaned back in his chair, studying her for a moment. "I could tell you were having a rough night yesterday," he said. "I had plenty of those myself." Lisa blinked, caught off guard by his understanding tone. I'm really sorry about how I spoke to you," she blurted out. "I didn't realize who you were, and even if I had, I shouldn't have." Clint held up a hand, cutting her off gently. "No need to apologize," he said. "You're human. We all have our moments." His words, so calm and forgiving, hit Lisa harder than any reprimand ever could. She felt her throat tighten with emotion as she nodded. "Thank you," she said softly. Clint took a sip of his coffee, a faint smile still playing on his lips. "But I will say this," he added, his tone turning just a touch serious. "You've got a good place here. It's worth taking pride in. Remember that, even on the tough days." Lisa nodded again, his words sinking in deeper than she expected. For the rest of the evening, she carried herself a little differently, not just because she wanted to impress Clint Eastwood, but because she realized he was right. As the night went on, the suspense of the previous day began to melt away. Clint finished his meal, left another generous tip, and walked out without a fuss. But as he stepped out the door, Lisa couldn't shake the feeling that the encounter had left a mark, not just on her, but on him too. What she didn't know was that the story was far from over. The next few days at the restaurant felt different for Lisa. Clint Eastwood's visit had shifted something in her. She wasn't just going through the motions anymore. She took more care with her tables, greeted customers with genuine warmth, and even found herself smiling more, even when the pressure was on. But she couldn't shake the lingering thought. Why had Clint Eastwood been so kind to her after what had happened? Most people wouldn't have forgiven her so easily, let alone someone with his level of fame and influence. About a week later, just when Lisa thought life was returning to normal, Carla called the staff together before their shift started. Her face was lit with excitement as she waved a folded piece of paper in the air. "Listen up, everyone," she said. "We got a letter, an actual handwritten letter, from Clint Eastwood." The room fell silent, and all eyes turned to Carla. Lisa's heart sank. She braced herself, convinced that this was it, her official reprimand, or worse, her termination. She could already feel the embarrassment bubbling up, imagining the letter calling out her behavior in front of everyone. But what came next left her stunned. Carla unfolded the paper and began to read aloud. "Dear team," she started, "I wanted to take a moment to thank all of you for the incredible work you do. Running a restaurant is no small feat, and it's clear that this place runs on passion and hard work. It's a joy to see people who care about what they do, even on the tough days." Lisa felt a lump form in her throat. Clint's words weren't just kind, they were heartfelt. Carla continued reading, her voice steady and clear. "I also want to say something about Lisa. She's got the spark this place needs, even if she doesn't realize it yet. We all have moments when the pressure gets to us, but how we move forward is what matters. I see potential in her, and I hope she sees it in herself too." Lisa's cheeks burned as the rest of the staff turned to look at her. She didn't know whether to smile or cry. Clint Eastwood had singled her out, not to call her out for her mistake, but to lift her up. It was the last thing she expected, and it hit her harder than she could have imagined. Carla finished the letter with a smile. "P.S. Dinner's on me the next time I'm in town. Keep up the great work." The room erupted into murmurs and a few cheers. Lisa could barely process it. Clint Eastwood didn't just forgive her, he believed in her. That evening, as Lisa worked her tables, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Every smile she gave, every order she took, and every dish she served felt meaningful. It wasn't about the tips or just getting through the shift anymore. She realized this place wasn't just a restaurant. It was a space where people connected, laughed, and shared moments. And she was a part of that. A few weeks later, Clint Eastwood did return, just as he promised. This time, the entire staff was ready for him. Lisa, in particular, greeted him with a genuine smile and a sense of confidence she hadn't felt before. He didn't stay long, just enough time for a quick meal and some friendly conversation, but his presence left a lasting impact. As he was leaving, Clint stopped by the counter where Lisa was standing. "You're doing good, kid," he said with a warm smile. "Keep it up." And just like that, he walked out the door, leaving Lisa with a sense of pride and gratitude she hadn't expected. From that day on, Lisa carried Clint's words with her. She wasn't perfect, but she didn't need to be. What mattered was how she handled the challenges, learned from her mistakes, and found meaning in what she did. Clint Eastwood's quiet wisdom had turned an embarrassing moment into a life lesson, and Lisa knew she'd never forget it. The restaurant thrived, and so did Lisa. She worked her way up, eventually becoming a manager and mentoring new staff with the same understanding and encouragement Clint had shown her. Every time she told the story of the night she insulted Clint Eastwood without realizing he owned the restaurant, it brought laughter, disbelief, and more importantly, a reminder that even our worst moments can lead to something good. It was a story she'd carry with her forever, not as a mistake, but as the moment that changed everything.